Hey everybody, and welcome back to the one and only r/EntitledParents, where our first post is submitted by user/thecryptoqueer. I haven't been on speaking terms with my adoptive parents for about a decade. My mum was physically and mentally abusive my entire life, and my dad was distant and emotionally unavailable. I tried to repair the relationship with them as an adult, but it became clear very quickly that they were never going to be able to meet me in the middle, and cutting off contact was the only way for me to move on with my life. As the oldest, I got the brunt of the abuse. For context, we're all adopted, all from different families. While I'm glad my siblings didn't get the experience I did, I'm often frustrated with one of my sisters in particular, who flat out refuses to acknowledge that our mum did what she did, despite what I or our other siblings have to say about it. My sister is the favourite, and the blank slate our mum has been able to project all her dreams onto, so this is not likely to ever change. And hey, she makes it work for her in the form of financial support, so good for her. A few years ago, I was at work and this sister texted me to tell me our grandpa had died. It wasn't a surprise, but it was still devastating. I was extremely close to my grandparents, and my grandpa in particular. He and my grandma are probably the only reason I'm a functional human being today. Spending time with them as a kid was the only refuge I had from home. I asked my sister for some details. It was a Wednesday and the funeral was going to be Friday or Saturday. They were just getting the last details together. I asked if she was sure. She said yes. The funeral was going to be one of those 2 days. She was absolutely sure. She'd been taking care of the planning with our mum. I asked her not to tell our mum that I was going to be coming. I knew it would cause drama and I wasn't looking to be disruptive. I figured I could stay in the back, say my goodbyes, and slip out. My sister exploded at me. Apparently, our grandpa dying didn't warrant a phone call, but asking her not to say anything to our mum did. She screamed at me that I was being ridiculous, that our mum wanted me there and already knew that my sister was talking to me. I was the reason that we couldn't be a family. I needed to let it go. There was no real point in arguing, and since my mum knew I was coming anyway, I didn't have much choice but to suck it up. I'd hoped that since she knew how close my grandpa and I had been, she would maybe be reasonable and civil for a day. I hung up with my sister and got things in place to make the drive down. I lived 10 hours north of where the funeral was going to be, and if I wanted to be there in time, it meant leaving first thing the next day so I could be there before Friday. The drive down goes through some mountains, and I put my phone in airplane mode to use it for music. It skips otherwise, hitching when it tries to find a connection. And stopped for food about 7 hours in when I took my phone out of airplane mode and checked for messages. There was a text from my sister telling me that our mum had changed her mind. The funeral was going to be next Wednesday afternoon. It had been a fight to get the days off I'd managed. My boss wasn't going to give me more time. I was stuck and I had no choice but to turn around and go home. I turned around and drove the 7 hours home and had a few shots in my grandpa's name and passed out. He knew how I felt about him, and our mum can't take that. And I mean, that's just such a sucky situation. At least, Opie, you remembered your grandpa in your own way. Maybe didn't get to see him one last time, but as long as everyone knows the way that you felt about him, that's all that matters. Our next post is by user/Felina Lane. So, quick info, the place I teach in has big windows on the walls between the classrooms, and the walls between the classrooms and hallway. One class is roughly 10 students. This little play's actors are me, the entitled mother, and the kids of my class. So, I teach class, everything is going well, and the kids are pretty focused. Even though we talk and joke a bit as well, when suddenly EM comes in the hallway. We normally forbid parents from entering classrooms during the class, because we strongly advocate for kid independence and letting them experiment without parents breathing down their necks. We have special times for sharing with their family after the class, which we set up for that very purpose. So EM is in the hallway and she peers into every classroom to locate her kid. She finally finds him in the classroom next to mine, which is the only room to not have direct windows into it from the hallway, just the door, which is closed. So the only way to see the inside of that room is through the wall in my room. So EM can't wave to her kid, and she decides to enter my classroom, to then start waving at him in the middle of my class, disturbing it quite thoroughly, kicking the kid's bags around as she paces. Now, I rarely deal with entitled parents because I don't tolerate BS in any form, and I can have a bit of a short temper. My kids know how little BS I take, and they all like that with me the rules are clear-cut, so they know what's about to happen. And they all look at EM with the happy cruel, "Ooh, she's gonna get it" look of kids seeing someone else getting scolded. I cough once to get her attention, and as she turns around, I stare her down like the rude fool she is, and then, "What?" Me in a calm, level voice. "Mom, in case you failed to notice, I'm having a class, so you're going to return outside." "But my son is in that other classroom, and I wanted to see him." "Mom, the children I teach are capable of understanding such clear and simple instructions easily enough. Are you not able to do the same?" As I say this, I point to my kids, and they're all holding back laughs. "Yes, in a minute, my son..." Me cutting her off, making her glare at me. "Mom, your son isn't the one interrupting my class. He's following his own class. I asked you to get out because your presence disturbs my class. You will leave now." At this point, my kids start laughing, because the now is usually my trump card with any of them that makes trouble. If I use the now in that very special tone, it means they're pretty much screwed, and the next step after this is me calling their parents. In this case, it would have been calling my manager, but EM finally got the hint and left the room under the kids' laughs and grumbling about how she would talk with my manager about my conduct in class and my education skills. At which point, I just turned to the kids with a big smile. I didn't get into any sort of trouble. EM got a second lecture from my manager about how parents are not to enter a classroom unless it's an emergency. And her own kid, when class ended, gave her a very loud complaint about the whole thing. And yes, perhaps the most embarrassing thing happened to this entitled mother, getting laughed at by a bunch of kids. Our next post is by user/hornybarista10. My mother and stepfather pawned our stuff a lot when we were children. I would come home most days to find that my gaming console or other belongings were gone. There were never any apologies. My parents told us that they needed the money. Eventually, my grandma bought a new PlayStation to play with, since my parents pawned the one she had previously. She loves the console to death, and is to this day a devoted gamer. But the pawning was not just restricted to the purchases of the parents, so my sister made a habit of taking the console with her when she left the house. We were getting ready to spend the afternoon out last year when my mother stomps in, demanding that she give up the PS4. My sister tried to run past her, but my mother attacked her. She yanked my sister's hair and tried to dig in her backpack. The whole time, she was screaming, "I'm your mother, and everything that is under this roof belongs to me!" When my sister got outside, my mother screamed, "You're no longer welcome in this house!" My sister did not return since. She lives with our grandmother and I. I'm her older sister, and I had the sense to leave that hellhole 2 years before my sister did. She was 16 and I was 18 when it happened. Wow, that one escalated quickly. At least these girls had their grandparents to fall back on when they needed it most. Our next post is by user/LightRay1943. So this is very hard to talk about because everything happened so suddenly that a lot of us are still processing it. 2 days ago, my closest friend was scheduled for an open heart transplant. Ever since she was little, she had problems with her heart, and everyone promised her that she would get a new heart someday. She was on the waiting list for years, until finally it was her turn. They kept her in the hospital overnight so that they could prep her, but something happened that night that the doctors won't tell us since we aren't family. And her father is in such a terrible state that he basically locked himself away. She passed away in her sleep the night before her surgery. The next night, we all gathered at her favourite bar and held a small memorial with just her closest friends and family, which turned out to be bigger than we thought. The manager was a close friend, so he closed the bar for the day so we could have our time. Everything just felt dark, like a piece of each of our souls were missing. She was one of my closest friends. She was the one you always went to talk to when you had a problem, the one who loved to bake and always experimented in the kitchen. She was the first girl I kissed, and she had an amazing singing voice. We all just sat at the bar, telling stories about her and reminiscing about every moment. Her stepmom, on the other hand, a horrible and selfish woman who literally only married her dad for a green card, always had to give some backhanded compliment any chance she could. Saying stuff like, "She could cook, but oh lord, she never did the dishes." Or, "I might have to hire a maid now, she was the only one who knew how to use the vacuum cleaner." Very snarky comments here and there, and got upset when you called her out on it. At one point, we just ignored her and kept to ourselves. We didn't notice her start to pound away at the bar, drink after drink, until she was so hammered, she wanted to turn my friend's memorial into some sleazy nightclub moment. She kept trying to change the music to something she could dance to, or kept trying to kiss some of the guys cause she's grieving and needs someone to comfort her. In the 4 years that she's been in my friend's life, she's treated her more like a maid in her own home. Always making her clean and cook cause she didn't know how. Made fun of her cause she didn't go to college. Always insulted all her friends cause they looked different. We got so tired of her that we called her an Uber and kicked her out. Made sure to call my friend's aunt to grab her when she got home since she was making arrangements for her funeral. My friend always wanted to be cremated and have her ashes planted into a tree. She was such a hippie and we loved it. Her stepmom has been upset about how we treated her and is threatening not to invite us to the funeral, but her dad won't allow it. So Marcy, wherever you end up in your next life, whether you're reborn as a lizard like you always wanted, or a baby for another family to love, just know you will always stay in our hearts. And these are just the worst types of people, the ones that try to make everything about themselves. Honestly, it's just easier to avoid people like these, but I guess if it's your mother, then that doesn't really work. Alright everyone, I hope you enjoyed this little video, and if you did, make sure to subscribe to the channel for Reddit videos every second day, and make sure to comment down below telling me your own stories. But with that said, that is it from me. I hope you all enjoyed, and all I want to do is see you all here next time. See you later, guys.